Hello, just get a message across. My name's Dr. AK, and the message I'm trying to get across here is to do with the Nigerian scenario, and I just want to talk a bit about the issue of the good campaign of encouraging people to get their voters card in order to take part in general elections. That would be in 2019. Now, the idea of everybody getting their voters card and voting en masse is a credible idea. It is a good idea in itself. But I also have to mention that in itself, the voter's card is not a magic wand, and it does seem it's been exaggerated or elevated into the status of a magic wand. Now, that would have a substantial amount of naivety. So I don't want us to get that notion that the voter's card is the absolute solution. It is only part of the solution, and to be quite frank, it's not the greatest portion of the solution to the Nigerian scenario. So, whilst encouraging the idea of the voter's card, I would also mention something I think is worth talking about. I completely believe it is far more important than the voter's card. Now, I don't know why sometimes, you get that impression that Nigerians don't believe that we can have a solution. A lot of times, there's all these side attractions, and instead of focusing on what really matters, there's just too many side attractions. And there's a lot of emphasis on things that just ends up repeating itself for decades and decades. Now, let's talk about non-governmental organisations. Let's talk about the need for awareness amongst our people. Let's try and focus about making the right changes right from the grassroots, okay? And progressing from that point to greater and better achievements, more realistic achievements. Part of what we really want, and I suppose what we need as well, is getting the right people to the right positions in office. And to do that, you do need to have a method, a methodology. Now, methods are practical ways of doing things. So, applicable ways of doing things. So methods are not theories, really. They are practical things. If you've got a thick forest and a massive jungle, for instance, and you're trying to get from point A to point B, there's a few ways you can do that. You can actually walk, that's one, okay? And so you're going to prepare yourself for every peril along the way, all right, when you're walking through that thick forest. If you want to get yourself into a cozy component, like a car, a vehicle, well, it's pretty clear you're not going to be riding through the trees, okay, and all the thick forest in that car. So getting from point A to point B is your objective. But how you achieve that is your method. And methods are practical. So if you want to get that car from point A to point B, you're going to have to create a road. You have to sort of pave a way by building a road very cautiously and very sensibly through that thick forest. Now, of course, that is if you really need to go through that thick forest. But I'm just using that as an analogy so you know what a method means. It's a practical way by which things are done to achieve specific objectives. So if the objective is to get the right person, the right people, into the right offices within the Nigerian context, I think it is very paramount and really important that we get the right methods, because it is pretty obvious that at the moment the methods of doing that is non-existent. And because it's non-existent, what has been achieved over so many decades is just very little to write home about. Now, of course, certain quarters might disagree with that. Well, I'm not here to debate for disagreements. I'm just putting a very straightforward statement. And if you've got brains, I think you think straightforwardly and understand what I'm saying. Talking about elections, look, your past, okay, used to be your present. Your present back then was your past. And your future then is now your present. So if you ignore the past, and if you don't take lessons from the past, I think it's a self-destructive ignorance to ignore the past and pretend that you can, bulldoze your way into the future without any credence in what you did in the past and how consequential your past actually is for your present predicament. I would pretty much remember as a child going back quite a few years when my parents used to talk about elections, voting, and sometimes it was a bit of exciting discussions really about voting, democracy in Nigeria, and you're going back to the very beginning of the 80s really. And it was just talk about, voting, elections, democracy. Now, democracy may not be ideal all the time, and for every country, it has its own, every country's got its own specific flavour, and Nigeria is not an exception. It has its own flavour in terms of how you would perform democratic activities. Now, there was elections back in the days. There was a lot of talk about it. It looked very prospective. People had a lot of aspirations and hopes. Probably there were a few doubters around, but in the end, elections took place. I don't want us to pretend that elections have never taken place in Nigeria in the past. And I don't want us to see elections as some sort of almighty important activity, because elections have taken place in the past. Whether you like it or not, there has been democracy in Nigeria, whether you like it or not. Okay? The issue really is, as it stands currently, okay, the rulership in Nigeria is more like the denominator, and you've got the community at large as the numerator. Now that is a sordid, horrible scenario which needs urgent reversal, because if you're going to be sensible in any democracy or any sort of country, really, a society for that matter, you do need to have your community as the denominator and not the rulership as the denominator, because the minute your rulership becomes the denominator and you've got your community hanging up there as the numerator, that is a terrible thing, because all that means is your rulership can end up just doing whatever it likes, and I think that seems pretty much like Nigeria at the moment. So you need to get the right people into the right places, okay? And to do that, you need to prepare. Number one, get the people aware. People need awareness as to what sort of people you need to have in these offices and what are the purposes of these offices. And you need to talk about non-governmental organizations springing up right, left and centre and wide across the whole country, from the grassroots, local, regional, national and international level, with collaborations obviously with organizations that have got moral fibre. The importance of non-governmental organizations you can never overstate. And the reason I say that is because this is where you demonstrate self-governance, okay? At a slightly less formal level, okay? But it is the self-governance that has accountability and responsibility that you want to spread around. So if you're going to get a rulership that is used to the habit of accountability and responsibility, they have to start from the grassroots. Accountability and responsibility, and can I just add discipline, has to be something that the grassroots is used to as a habit. If that is not the habit of the general mass, it is very difficult to suddenly get some special Josephs or special Moseses, to just come out from somewhere and start leading the nation. That is possible, but the chances of that is pretty rare now, and that obviously doesn't seem to have happened a lot over the last 50, 60 years, talking about Nigeria now. So I think there has to be this idea of accountability, responsibility and discipline right from the grassroots. And the one way to do that, I would never suggest you wait for the Nigerian government to do that. I think that would be silly if you expect that at this moment. At the current rate, and if you look at your history carefully, that has very hardly happened. So I think you need to now rely on non-governmental organizations to do that job. And gradually, you would build that status of accountability, responsibility and discipline amongst the grassroots, okay? Local, regional, national and international. And that platform can be sustained as it grows. But you need it springing up from right, left, centre, okay? Not just a couple of organisations, but it has to be a mass habit. And one way or the other, you would find out that the more of that you have as your substrate, the chances are you're going to get such persons coming into the higher positions and becoming electable. If you've got 80% of the mass in managerial tatters I'm not expecting you to get a vast majority of the electables being the great people you want them to be. I think you're going to have a failure, no matter how many voters' cards you have. So I want us to start focusing on this discussion about non-governmental organisations, making the public, the masses, pretty much aware of the sort of aspirations you should be looking towards. Okay? So, voters' card, great idea, but it's not a magic wand. Okay? Now, so the discussion about self-governance at the least level has to start and has to be encouraged. And the government system will catch up and start transforming itself, I suppose, when it sees a bulk size and numbers of non-governmental organisations doing a great job. If you take a good look around, I think you'll notice that there are a few non-government organisations that are doing a great job across the globe. I think that's the case. You might find a few of them not very wonderful, I imagine, but a substantial amount are doing fantastic things, and I think they're worth emulating in a lot of ways. There's a lot to say, but I think the message is just we need to start from somewhere to start focusing on self-governance and looking at good collaborations at the different levels, whether you're talking local, regional, national or international, sensible collaborations to work on improving awareness of the people and at the same time bring in self-governance through non-governmental organisations. And look, listen, I think the African tradition from ancient days have known the idea of non-governmental organisations working and doing a great job for themselves and for the society at large. And I think we need to revisit that. There are things that were pretty wrong if you look back to the African traditions in the past and some cultures, but the vast majority of what they did were pretty good in a lot of ways. I think you just have to focus on those positive aspects, and try to do a great job for the future. Voters' card, well done, good idea, but just remember, it's not a magic wand. And can we not sort of elevate it too much? Because it might be disappointing to have the same silly discussions about failures and woes 15 years down the line from now. So can I just mention that the message of self-governance through non-governmental organisations working for the awareness of the public and for the good of the public should be something we should take up very seriously, and hopefully we'll get better electable personalities into the superior official positions, and it's also likely that the government might start emulating good governance where you see it, whether it's at state levels or whatever levels you've got, or local government, but also from the non-governmental organisations that will spring up in increasing numbers to show that people can take care of themselves, okay? People are able to take care of themselves, and people can manage well within the context of their country if they are thinking correctly, positively, sensibly, and they've got the stimulus to work on their potentials to bring the best possible to themselves and their surrounding environment. So can we start that discussion and expand that discussion? Because The better we do that, and the sooner we do that, we will see good results in a matter of good time. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.